The sun was warm and forgiving on Maple Drive in the picturesque town of Cedar Falls. It was one of those postcard-perfect days that you thought had to believe in fresh beginnings. David, a logical software engineer, hefted a box out of the moving van with a contented grunt, his smile wide and sincere. This was it. The quaint two-story colonial with its tidy yard and ancient, sturdy bones was the very epitome of the American dream he'd fought so assiduously to achieve. His wife, Sarah, oversaw the movers, her emotions welling up in a complicated mix of happiness and relief. It was better than the pictures in the listing had led them to expect. Their 6-year-old daughter, Lily, skittered after a butterfly across the green grass, her giggles like wind chimes. Good schools, low crime rate, and a backyard large enough for a dog, David exclaimed, putting an arm around Sarah. The American dream delivered. Lily, the mimic, repeated, "Delivered." Sarah chuckled, but for an instant her eyes flicked towards next door, a curtain falling into place in the neighbor's window. She shrugged it off as small-town nosiness. Within, the house was roomy and full of promise, though it had the faint, dusty smell of its history. Sarah unpacked china in the living room while Lily wandered, little footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. She paused beside the huge brick fireplace that took up much of one wall, tilting her head as if she heard a faraway tune. "Mommy," she said, her voice little and contemplative. "The house has a song." Sarah smiled. "What kind of song, sweetie?" Lily scrunched up her lips and tried a soft, tuneless whistle. The notes were disconnected, a little off-key, a random succession of sound. But the sound made an unexplainable, icy finger of fear run down Sarah's spine. It was an innocent sound, but it was inherently wrong. "It's most likely just the pipes, honey. Old houses creak," she told her daughter and herself. David came in later, wiping sweat from his forehead. Miller said the former owner, Mr. Albright, was a recluse. Lived here 50 years. Died in his sleep. Right in this room. He slapped the wall fondly. Sarah winced. "Do you have to be so ghoulish?" "On our first day," David laughed. "What? It's true." He adored the place. "We're just the next chapter." That evening, as the house settled into its new strange creaks and groans, Sarah lay awake, and then she heard it, faint from downstairs, a soft, tuneless whistle, the same disjointed notes Lily had made. She elbowed David, but he was dead asleep. She convinced herself it was the wind, a trick of the old house, and soon she was able to convince herself it was true. A week went by, the initial excitement giving way to the routine of unpacking. Sarah was putting family photographs on the mantelpiece when her fingers touched upon a loose brick in the fireplace. Curiosity spurred, she wiggled it loose and discovered a sepia-colored photograph hidden inside the dark recess. It was a portrait of a severe-looking man in his 40s, his eyes staring blankly at the camera, devoid of warmth. On the back, in spidery cursive, was written, "Arthur Albright, 1978. She showed it to David. "So that's the old guy. Looks friendly," he joked, but Sarah wasn't laughing. "He's intense. And why was it hidden?" David shrugged, his practicality a shield against her growing unease. "People are strange, Sar, don't think about it." But she couldn't help it. That secret picture felt like a secret, and secrets in a new house were never a good idea. The discomfort brewed. Later, in the damp, cold basement, the lone exposed bulb glowed erratically as Sarah rummaged for laundry detergent. Out of the dark depths of the dirt floor crawlspace, she heard it once again. The whistle. This time louder, closer. It was not melodic or happy. It was a warning. A parched, wheezy noise that appeared to draw the very heat from the atmosphere. She stood still, her heart clashing against her ribcage. The noise ceased the instant she held her breath. She blundered in the darkness, her own breath fogging in a sudden, unexplained cold that had not been present seconds earlier. That evening, as she put Lily into bed, her daughter's naive words chilled her blood. "The whistling man is sad," Lily whispered, gazing into the dark corner of her bedroom. Sarah spoke in a tight whisper. "What whistling man, baby?" "The one who stands over there. He just whistles. He doesn't have a face." Sarah gazed into the vacant corner, a primal terror germinating. She imposed a calm she did not feel. "It's only a bad dream, sweetheart. No one is there. But she slept with the hallway light on for the remainder of the night. David cooked burgers in the backyard, the nice smell of charcoal not doing much to brighten the heavy atmosphere. Sarah sat covered up in a blanket, shaking despite the heat of the day. "Davy, I'm not insane. I hear it too." Lily hears it. "It's the same tune each time," she urged. David let out a sigh, the rush of a man grasping for reason. "It's an old house. It's the wind through a leak in the foundation. It's the pipes. We're hearing what we're listening for because Lily mentioned something." Sarah's tone became more urgent. "And what about the cold spots? The sense of being watched?" "Drafts and paranoia," he replied stubbornly. "Look, I'll call Agent Miller, okay? Perhaps he's heard something about the house's idiosyncrasies." He placed the call on speakerphone. "Hey, Phil, David. Yeah, the house on Maple. Listen, we're experiencing some strange noises. Whistling noises." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. "Whistling?" Miller's voice became suddenly guarded. What sort of whistling?" Sarah inclined herself. "Tuneless. Sort of like a person humming a tune but trying to recall a song." Another silence, this time longer. When Miller finally spoke, his jollity was artificial and brittle. "Oh, that! Sure, the old furnace flue. Arthur. Mr. Albright, he used to whistle. Used to whistle all the time. Harmless thing. Drove the neighbors a little crazy, but that's all it was. Just a habit." He hung up roughly. David beamed with triumph. "See? A weird old guy who whistled. The noise is likely stuck in the acoustics of the house or something. A ghost of sound." But Sarah was fixated on one sentence. "Drove the neighbors a little nuts." The words rang in her brain. A harmless description now that seemed profoundly sinister. The nightmare fully disclosed itself on the 10th day. David was awakened not by a noise, but by a presence. He came to where Sarah was standing at the top of the stairs, trembling and crying soundlessly. "He's in Lily's room," she breathed, her voice scraping with fear. Adrenaline pumping, David reached for his aluminum baseball bat and moved silently to Lily's door. He opened it. The room was cold, a winter pocket in the heat of the house. Lily was sitting upright in bed, awake, her little body tense. She stood gazing at the same vacant corner she'd spoken of earlier. "He's asking for it back," she breathed, her voice not her own. David's bravado, his go-to anchor, started to dissolve. "Asking for what back, honey?" "His picture." There was a tangible, aggressive presence in the room, a weight that felt heavy and difficult to get air. He watched Lily's breath fog in the cold air. And then it occurred. From directly beside his ear, so close he could hear the void of its passing, there came the whistle. No longer distant or faint. It was cutting, keen and heavy with a foul, archaic evil. David lurched backward, the bat crashing to the ground. He closed the door hard, scooped up Lily, and they barricaded themselves within the master bedroom. The whistling did not abate. It shifted. It began in the hall, then scratched on the door, then filtered through walls. It was no longer one sound, but several. Interwoven whistles, all the same jarring tune, producing a cacophony of unheard rage that continued until dawn. The next morning, the house was silent, but the terror had taken root. A poisonous vine wrapping around their family. David, pale and hollow-eyed, was scouring digital archives on his laptop. Sarah held a trembling Lily who had barely spoken since the night before. "I found something," David said, his voice hollow. "Arthur Albright. He was a taxidermist. Worked from home." Sarah closed her eyes. "A taxidermist? Of course he was," David went on, his voice falling. "There's more. An article from 1982. Local man questioned in disappearance of neighborhood pets. They never charged him, but the neighbors were sure. They said he'd whistle when he worked in his basement, that the kids were afraid of him." He gazed up, his face pale. They referred to him as the Whistler. The secret photograph, the dead-eyed gaze. Sarah recalled the chill of the basement, the noise coming from the crawlspace. "He didn't love this house," she murmured, the understanding a blow to the body. "He owned it, and we broke his peace. The choice was made. They would leave, They would get a hotel room and never come back. While David quickly loaded the car, Sarah rushed inside to retrieve her purse from the living room. As she walked by the fireplace, the whistling began once more. Not boisterous, but from right behind her. She turned gradually. The sepia photograph of Arthur Albright was on the mantelpiece. It wasn't there before, and in the picture, his head was tilted and his lips puckered, as though he had been caught in mid-whistle. A shriek ripped from her throat. "David!" David hurried into the room. "What? What's wrong?" She jabbed a shaking finger towards the photo, but when he glanced, it was the usual stern-faced picture. "Sarah, it's only a picture," he exclaimed, his own voice worn to shreds with tension. "No, his mouth." It was different. Downstairs, a thudding thud reverberated through the ceiling. Then, Lily's small voice thick with fear. "Mommy? Daddy?" They thundered upstairs to discover Lily's room locked. "Lily, open the door." Sarah screamed, pounding on the door. "He won't let me," Lily whispered on the other side. Then, the whistling burst from inside the room. It was no longer merely sound. It was a physical power. The doorknob shook with frenzied, unnatural force. The hallway lights danced madly and went out, hiding them in choking blackness. David hurled his shoulder against the heavy oak door. It didn't move. "It's locked from the inside," he bellowed. Sarah, frantic, pushed herself against the door. "What do you want?" "Leave her alone." The whistling ceased. The quiet was more frightening than the sound. Then a lone, sharp, childish voice from beneath the door. An imitation of Lily's voice, but it was empty and off. "I want my house." With one last wild yell, David kicked the door at the latch. The creaky wood splintered and gave. The room was in shambles, as if there had been a tornado through it. And in the middle, Lily stood, her back to the corner. She slowly turned. Her eyes were wide and empty. She stared straight through them. She pursed her lips, and she whistled. The same tuneless, fractured notes, but now exactly copied, coming from her tiny body as if she were a musical instrument. Sarah shrieked. David rushed at her, but Lily sprang off with a spine-chilling spider's speed, vanishing down the black hallway. The house itself was animate now, creaking as a clamor of whistles swept from every vent, crack, and crevice. It was in the walls, the floor, their skulls themselves. They ran the noise into the basement, where they discovered her standing in front of the dark, gaping mouth of the crawlspace. "He says you have to go," the voice through Lily's mouth said. "He doesn't like new people." David made a desperate, last grasp for his daughter. As his fingers closed on her tiny shoulders, the basement door slammed shut behind them with ghostly power. The lone light bulb burst, dropping them into complete, smothering darkness. The lone sound was the constant, raspy whistle now coming from Lily's lifeless body. Defeated, shattered, Sarah collapsed to her knees on the hard, frigid concrete floor, weeping. "Please," she implored into the all-encompassing darkness. "Please, just take the house. It's yours. Just give me my daughter back." The whistling ceased. The silence was complete. A small, warm hand brushed Sarah's soggy cheek. "Mommy!" Lily grumbled, her speech heavy with fatigue and confusion. "I'm cold." The lights flared back on. The basement door stood open. The house was quiet. Not a settling quiet, but a deep, waiting quiet. They didn't say a word. They didn't pack a single item. They took their spent daughter to the car and left Maple Drive without looking back. Hours later, their vehicle sat outside a budget, neon-painted motel on the edge of town, a temporary sanctuary from the horror. David was on the phone, his voice an empty monotone. "Yes, we want to sell. Now. No, we don't mind the loss. Just finish it." He hung up and climbed into the driver's seat, the world weighing upon him. In the back of the car, Sarah cradled sleeping Lily, brushing her hair, gazing out at the motel sign humming and flashing. They rode in a stunned, traumatized silence, the night's events too big to speak of. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her sleep, saying something indistinguishable. Sarah reached out closer, her mothering impulse to soothe overpowering her fear. And then, so soft it was hardly audible, a wispy, non-tuneful whistle slipped from Lily's open mouth. Only 2 notes. The first 2 notes of the song. Lily's eyes stayed closed, her expression a mask of calm slumber. Sarah's breath jammed in her throat, her blood freezing cold. Her wide, shocked eyes clashed with David's in the rearview mirror. His pale face, lit by the ill-looking neon light, was a grimace of realization. Absolute despair. They had left the house, but they hadn't left the terror behind. They had taken with them a fragment of it. A silent traveler hidden in the one thing they cherished most. The car waited quietly beneath the whining sign, a small, delicate patch of light in the big, uncaring American darkness.